have, in my opinion, kind of reversed the tide. You can still go out and get your Michelob or your Miller in the, the supermarket. But if just to have a beer, but if you really want to enjoy it or whatever, go to the microbreweries. And there was a couple of restaurant concepts. Does Twin Peaks have its own microbrewery here? No?
Twisted Spur.
What?
Twisted Spur, that restaurant is there in microbrewery.
Okay, Twisted Spur.
Twin Peaks, Twisted Spur.
Twisted Spur, okay. So, go and check it out. There, again, you really have to admire. Now, what happens with microbrewery beer? The cost goes way up because they're not mass producing it. They're not watering it down. But if you really want to enjoy a beer, if you're into beer, and you go out and you really want to have a nice night, order something local, a microbrewery. And I really admire the brewmasters that they, that have done this again and brought it back. So, highly encourage you to look at that. Okay? All right. Talked about wine. Talked about beer. What's left? Liquor, or what we call spirits. Spirits and liquor are synonymous. Now, spirits or liquor is just liquid that has been fermented, like wine and beer, but it's been distilled. Okay, we're going to talk about distilling here in a second. When we talk about spirits, we always talk about proof. Okay? Proof is the liquor's alcohol content. In U.S., proof is twice the percentage of alcohol. What's the maximum proof you can have? By the way, 200. Make sure you know that, because you'll see that again. And make sure you know, don't get confused. Okay? If something is 100% proof, what's the alcohol content? 50%. Okay? You say, Professor Smith, I bet you have an interesting story about how proof came about. And you would be right. Nowadays, we have these laboratories we can go to, we can hand them and say, what's the percentage of alcohol? And they put it to the spectrometer, and they say, this is 70% alcohol. Okay? Now, back in the day, what was considered to be maximum or best proof is 100 proof. That's what you wanted, 50% alcohol, 50% other. Okay? That was the best. But they didn't have these places to test this out. And so back in the day, if you were a mountain man and you trapped furs, for 6 months and you went down in the valley to the store, you'd say, I'm here to get my whiskey. I want your best whiskey. I'm going to trade you these furs for the whiskey. And the barkeep or the storekeeper would say, well, here's my best stuff. This is the best whiskey I've got. And the mountain man would say, well, prove it. So how do you prove it, right? What are we looking for? We're looking for 100 proof or 50% alcohol. They would take the whiskey and they'd put it in a cup. And they would put an equal amount of gunpowder in that cup. And they would take a match and they would throw it into the cup. If the match went out, what did that tell you? Not enough alcohol. Not enough alcohol. They take that match, they throw it into the cup, and it blows up. What's that tell you?
It's good to drink.
Yeah, you good. That's actually not good to drink. I'm going to tell you why in a second. Too much alcohol. But if you take that match and you put it in there, and you get a nice even burn, it's about 50% alcohol, and you proved that it's 100% what you want. Does that make sense? So that's how nowadays they just go to the laboratory. Okay. Now let's talk about distilling. Remember I said I don't know anything about beer? I'm not too good on beer. I come from a long line of moonshiners on my father's side. My grandfather was a moonshiner during Prohibition. And he used to tell me stories. So I know what I'm talking about here. Okay, came from the hills of West Virginia, or the hills of Virginia and West Virginia, depending on what day it was, where it still was. Okay, so we talk about distillation, right? Here's how you make moonshine. Don't do this at home, kids. It's very dangerous. Okay. That's a really bad cup. Okay. You get your mix. Now, whatever your mix is, we'll talk about that in a minute. But you get your water and your mix, and you put it in this kettle, right? And you put the activating agent in there, and you allow it to ferment. As I said before, what's the natural alcohol content you can typically get without using super yeast or any other method?
7.
To 7.5, let's say 7.5. Okay? Now 7.5, what's that in proof? That's not even, that's just a little over 3. Oh, wait, let me do it. It's 15 proof. Right? Not going to get drunk on that. So how do you do spirits? What you do is you put it in the kettle and you let it ferment to its maximum, 7.5%. Okay? Then you distill it. How do you distill it? You light a fire under the kettle. That's a really bad fire, I know, but use your imagination. And you heat up your mixture. Okay? Now, my chemist in here, what happens when you apply heat to liquid?
It boils.
It boils, turns into vapor or steam. Let me ask you this. You've got alcohol and you've got, let's say, water. What will evaporate quicker?
Water.
Alcohol will. So you get it at the right temperature, and it's got to be the right temperature. What you start to do is get alcohol vapor, and it comes up into the cone, right, as vapor. As it leaves the heat source, what happens to the vapor? Concentrates, turns back into liquid form. And so what you're doing is you're distilling the alcohol out of the mixture and leaving other things behind. Now, if you set it, let me see to make sure I get this right, do my grandfather proud. Help me out. If you set it, the heat too low, if you set it too low, you get almost 100% alcohol. And you're thinking, oh, that's a pretty good thing, right? It's not a good thing, okay? If you're not a good moonshiner and you give people 100% alcohol, now here's the funny thing about alcohol, is that you can taste its presence, right? You can say, oh, I'm drinking alcohol, but you cannot taste the percentage. So to most of you, 50% alcohol tastes like 100% alcohol. You can't tell the difference. Is that a bad thing? It's very bad. Look how many rock stars have died from alcohol poisoning. My grandfather told me the story about a moonshiner, not him, that made a bad batch of moonshine and gave it all to his relatives, and they all went blind. The entire adult population of a family went blind overnight because they were drinking 100% alcohol. Because that moonshiner had put the wrong heat source underneath. Okay? Gave them 100% alcohol. Okay, there's a lesson there, right guys? Don't be drinking high-proof alcohol. Anybody, 151, heard of 151? Okay, you know what 151 stands for, right? 151 proof, which is about what percent alcohol? 75%. That's poison, people. 151 wasn't made for drinking. You know what it was made for? It might as well be flambéing. You know, these people who do cherries, jubilees, that wasn't originally created for drinking. The alcohol percentage is too high. So if you're drinking that stuff straight out of the bottle, please see someone you got a problem. Okay. And that problem might actually, I mean, people die of alcohol poisoning all the time. Okay. If you set it too low, if you set it too high, what happens? Yeah, it gets too much water in it, and basically you go from 7.5 to maybe 8.5%. You got to have the heat just right. Okay. Yes, sir.
So if you have it too low and you get like 100% alcohol coming out of it, can you just add water to it?
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Most people don't, though. I mean, how many moonshiners do you know? Everybody drink moonshine? They go, here's the jar of moonshine. Oh, here's a bottle of water. Mix them together. No, they'd look at you like, oh. You want to get it just right. Now, my grandfather told me again, he didn't have a chemistry lab. He could tell. Does anybody know how you can kind of tell if it's the right?
Would you shake it?
Who said that?
Bubbles?
How did you know that? Are you a moonshiner? You doing moonshine? He said you can take the jar and do this. And what happens is you'll get bubbles. It's called beating. Okay? Aren't you impressed I know all this stuff? He said, depending on the size of the bubbles, and now I'm going to get this wrong. Sorry, Granddad. They can either be too big or too small. You want them right about in the middle. And he could do that, and he'd look at it and say, okay, this is the right mixture, or this isn't right. The bubbles are too big or too small. You got it. It's kind of like the 100% proof. It's called beating. Nowadays, you just take it to the laboratory. Well, don't do it, first of all. It's illegal. But, you know, if you're going to do it, you know, get some chemistry set, and you can figure it out from there, okay? But it is, I'm telling you, and you know, we're funny, ha. I'm being serious. You don't want to be drinking 151. If you are, I mean, mix it very liberally with fruit punch or whatever you mix it with. Don't drink it straight out of the